Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. The purpose is really to give you a brief outline of what we've been doing for the last 6 months or so. And more importantly, we want to hear your comments, your thoughts, your advice, your criticisms, whatever it is we want to hear. The selectmen asked us to come back to a 2019 special town meeting to recommend a renovation option and a new building option. Then let you, the voters, make a decision which path we should take. So in order to do that, on October 7th, we're planning a special town meeting, and we will have a presentation. It's the only topic that right now on the town meeting. You all can debate it and come up with what you would like us to do to move forward to preserve Carroll's future. We started to work in early 2019 with the development of a renovation option. We did this by researching 19 years of documents that were prepared by various committees along with Don Mills of Mills Whitaker Architect. We also have met with Don Mills to go over these reports. The Selectmen commissioned On-Site Insight, which are building consultants, which did some work up at the regional schools to look at their buildings, to take a look at the building, and oddly enough, their report, which is on the website, said about the same thing that Don Mills told us, which is good. It's a second-party verification. The result is we are recommending probably around a $13 million renovation option. That would include new heating, HVAC system for the building, ADA necessary upgrades, which would be required, some structural changes inside the building envelope that will support the programs, an enhanced entrance with a greeting center and community meeting gathering area, and a renovation of the second floor library space, which also needs some work. This building is 40,900 square feet. And that's the building that we would be working with. For a new building option, we visited and or talked to 15 towns exploring their community buildings. Most towns that are similar to the size of Dover don't have a community building. They operate out of town halls for the most part, churches, schools, and they just share various spaces. Council on Aging, for example, recreation would be housed. Their offices would be housed in a town hall. The exceptions to this, which we'll talk a little bit about, are Stowe and Weston, which is larger than us, but Stowe and Weston. Larger neighboring towns like Wellesley, Natick, Lexington, and Sharon do have very active community centers and dedicated to both having senior space, children's space, adult space in their building and offering programs. The average size that we see out there is in the area of 12 to 15,000 square feet for a community building. We saw the Wellesley Senior Center, which is the Tolles Parsons building, which, I don't know how many, any of you seen that building? Yeah, it's on Route 16 across from the police station, and it's 12,400 square feet. It's a fabulous building. We like that building in terms, when we look at the size, in terms of its functionality. We're going to probably recommend to the town an 18,000 square foot new building. Basically thinking about Wellesley, Weston, and Stowe when we do that. We used a number of $700 per square foot. I will tell you from my conversations that's high, but I'd rather be high at this stage than low. So roughly $700 per square foot, including demo, that's about a $13,500,000 expense. And it meets the issues expressed by other towns that they wish they had had larger space. What I want to do is just take a look at some pictures that we looked at as related to new. This is the Tolles Parsons building. It's attractive, it fits in the town very nicely. It has 7 what I call activity rooms of varying sizes, the offices for the seniors as well as just seniors, it's a seniors building. This is the building that was built earlier by Weston. It's 22,000 square feet. It sits adjacent to an elementary school. But it gives you, again, a relatively size comparison. When you go in to most of the centers, you come into a welcoming desk. It's a defined entrance, and you check in, and now everybody uses cards, and you're signing in for programs so people know where they're going. So it's very much of a welcoming center. Also, a lot of these community centers have an area where you can gather if you want, have coffee. It's pretty informal. It's not a true restaurant of any kind, but it's a gathering space for people of all ages. This is just an example of what an activity room is. These are some seniors who are doing some exercises, but this could be used for dance classes, it could be used for aerobic classes, it can be used for stretching, all kinds of various programs. Here's another example of what I would call an activity room. Another one, it looks like they have a pottery station up front, so you could use it for the various arts. Another community space type room. This is a room that's in the Natick Community Center, and this is one room. You have in the front a kitchen, a place where people can get something to eat, and then on the other side, the wall that you can move back and forth is space you could use for rehearsals. They even have a stage. So that's just an example of a very large room that could be used in a variety of ways. This is pretty darn nice. This is Weston's, and this is Weston's large space activity room, used for all kinds of things, including private parties. This one is in Sharon, which is another large community space. And when I say it's large, it's more like this size room or even a little bigger. This is over in Medfield. I call it the library. It'd be a nice addition to a community building that you could have where you could come in and read or whatever you want to do. Then they have conference rooms. In them, again, we're talking about buildings the size of around 18,000 square feet. All of this is in there. Outside space. It would be nice to have outside space over there. So this is over in Medfield, and this is in Weston's, what they have for outside space. So that gives you an idea of some of the concepts and the things that we've been thinking about for new. The shared activity rooms would comprise of such things as dance, aerobic exercise, stretching and balance programs, spin and rowing, billiards, ping pong, board games, martial arts, music activities, theater rehearsals, committee meetings, conference rooms, lunches, parties, lectures, art programs, book clubs, etc. That's what a community building has. To us, it should be a welcoming space. Renovation and new can do that. It should be a very welcoming building, bringing the entire community together. The committee currently is in phase one of a three-part process. What we want to know from the voters on October 7th is a direction. What direction would you like us to take? Take a look at a renovation of the building over there, or would you like us to take a look at new? Both are in the area of 13 to 13.5 million. Or, if neither of those are what you want to do, we can continue doing exactly what we're doing now, spend $5 million for the HVAC system, some ADA requirements, electrical, etc. And according to on-site report, probably spend another $5 million over the next 20 years keeping the building up, which comes to about $10 million. On October 7th, you are going to give us the answer. This will take us to phase two, if we can go that way, where we would hire an owner's project manager, we'd hire an architect, and spend about a year going through schematic drawings, schematic plans, and coming up with pricing that would lead us to a final decision, which we would take to a town meeting. That town meeting would give us the design-build option, and we would then bond the 13 to 13.5 or whatever the number is. So that's really where we are. That's what we're doing. I don't know if you want to add anything, Bob?
So my pitch is going to be different. And it's really going to focus, first of all, I mean, I have some new faces. Is everybody reasonably familiar with the backstory on Caryl? No? Yeah, so, okay. So I'm going to give you the really super abbreviated version. So we've been at this for about 20 years. Over that 20-year period, we've spent, because people want to know how much have we invested in the building. Over that 20-year period, we've spent about $2 million on maintenance and repair work and some minor sort of painting and refurbishment. So the building has cost us so far about $100,000 a year. And in return, we've gotten 20 years of extended use. So that's sort of where we are now. So the question, why renovate or build new at this point? Why not just continue to spend $100,000 a year ad infinitum and maintain the building? Well, the problem is that the next set of maintenance requirements, the HVAC system, the control systems around the HVAC system, and several other items will trip the need for us to fully comply with the ADA Act, the American with Disabilities Act. And so that next clump of activities will total about $5 million, as Ford has said. So we thought, when we were going through this last year on Capital Budget Committee, we thought that before we spend an additional $5 million, and if we did, we would de facto retain Caryl as our community center, we would ask the voters what they would like us to do. And hence, we're faced, at a minimum, in order to keep the doors open and the building in use, we have a $5 million bogey that we're going to have to hit in the very near term. The on-site Insight firm had listed, I think it was about $4.5 million as year one critical maintenance items. So we just can't kick the can down the road really any further. So this is the tipping point. This is the inflection point. You know, this is the decision point. We need to actually have an affirmative vote, get the direction and the budget that people are willing to support and go forward with. The real sort of cool thing about this is that we really have the word is sometimes people use unique. I don't think it's unique. I think we have a rare opportunity to influence what the center of town looks like and to provide the community going forward with something special. It doesn't happen all that often. When you engage in a building project, whether it's a library or a school or protective agencies, it's all about the future. People approach these things full of optimism. It's an optimistic look to the future, and it's invariably aspirational. In the Caryl project, unfortunately, there is this long history. And we've had this tendency to sort of bicker and fight about things that happened quite a while ago. I think we need to drop that. We need to think about the future. What would Dover Town Center, or how would the town be best served with a building that we know is going to last another 40 or 50, or in this case, 100 years? You know, future-oriented, optimistic, aspirational. You know, and it's really, I mean, it's really what I truly feel. Then I wanted to come back to what's the value? What's the value of a community center, and how does one sort of grasp the value? So I was out in Illinois since Friday, attending my wife's uncle's 90th birthday, and the party was held in one of the grandson's homes, but they have a back shed. But it's not really a shed. They have a back space that's actually pretty nice. And what made that party special wasn't the fact that the shed was nice. It wasn't the fact that this food was good. It was the people at the party having a really good time and ribbing the heck out of a 90-year-old guy who's a Cub fan and a fisherman. So I want to come back here because, again, you know, Ford and us, we've been dealing in a lot of data and in a lot of detail and in a lot of numbers. But at the heart, it's really about the community, a space for people to come together for whatever, you know, for whatever purpose, for exercise, for an art class, for coffee with a buddy. And that is special because in Dover, as you all know, we tend to be and live in little silos. School, you know, preschool, Chickering, middle school, high school, empty nesters, and then older folks. And you're like the crypt keeper. and so having a space where people can come together and meet friends, et cetera, seems to me the heart of what a community should be. And so when I talk about future, and I talk about optimistic, and I talk about aspirational, that's what it means to me. And it was really that lesson in Illinois was it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. So Ford talked about our role, and he misspoke at least once. We're not going to recommend to the town. Our job is to provide the information that residents need to make an informed decision about which direction to go with the facility, keeping in mind those things I've talked about, and giving us an idea of how much money they would be willing to support when we come to asking for money. Now, we're just using approximate numbers now. They're relatively educated guesses, but they are guesses. We really won't know the actual number until we go through the design process that Ford talked about and be lots more precise. But it's likely to be in the range that we're talking about. So that's my pitch. Jeff?
If you have a question, I'm sorry, if you can come to the microphone, only because this is being televised, just say where you are, that would be great.
You want me to stand here or just?
Yeah, that would be perfect, yeah. Please.
Then I have to grow.
I'll just turn.
Hi, I came tonight, my name is Joanne Fisher, because I was the activity coordinator at the Newton Senior Center for 20 years. I have a very big investment in councils on aging, community centers, and I have some experience that I think might be helpful in terms of just information. The first most important thing is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but the Newton Senior Center is currently, so now they call it the Council on Aging. I've been retired for a few years. It is a renovated library. It's absolutely gorgeous, but, this is on TV or something?
Yep.
All right. I have to be a little careful then. We had some issues because old buildings get sick. And you think, oh, it doesn't look that old. How old is that building?
Part of it's almost 100 years.
Okay, it's old. It doesn't matter about maintaining, because what happens when there's a renovation is money is saved. Well, we really don't need to change that, or we don't really need to clear that out now. And I will tell you that the Council on Aging in Newton was cleaned up. There was remediation done at some cost. We did bring in some pretty powerful people from around the country to look at it. But for my part, renovating an old building is buying trouble. You're spending a huge sum of money. It's not going to be perfect. The other thing is you're working within a footprint that exists. Now, the city of Newton, when I was working there, I'm going to say 5, 6 years ago, was up to about 90,000 people. Over 20,000 were senior citizens. Those people, I think we were calling them 55 and over, which is shocking to people who are 56. But with that large group, we only had actually 5,000 square feet of usable space. That didn't include outdoor space. It didn't include where we sandwiched some things in. So you're looking at a fabulous space. And to be able to mix children in and young adults and adults will improve it's everything you said and more. It makes a big difference because a community is not just one small group of people here and one small group of people there. The other thing that did not come up, and I don't know if I've only lived in Dover 7 years, so I'm a newbie. I don't know if you've considered it, but one of the most important things that I felt we did at the Council on Aging was bring people in for activities and social engagement, but they then could access services they need, because what we all know is we grow, we change, we get older, we need those services. And if it's a familiar place, you can have social workers on site who can make sure that people can age in place comfortably. Now, we baby boomers are aging in place and we want to do it comfortably. If you don't want to see people just leave town and have a town full of very young, you need to provide those services. And I personally have met a few people in town that really can use those. And so I encourage you in you're looking at what to do with this building, provide space for social workers, for social services.
So let me just jump.
If you could step back when you're talking, that would be helpful
Okay.
for our viewers.
So we didn't.
All right. Hi
So
out there.
yep. So in terms of the community centers that we looked at, that we profiled, all have a very, very similar set of rooms and services. So to your point, there will be 2 town offices in either the renovated or the new. One would be for recreation, the town's recreation department, and one would be for the Council on Aging. And when we looked at the other towns, the Council on Aging, they have good space to provide the social services that many people, yeah, it is, yep. So that's absolutely right. The programs that these other towns and communities run are similar across the different communities and similar to a number of the programs that we also run. But it's demand driven. If there's enough people with voices who suggest to the directors, this would be a good program, they tend to do it. I have gotten questions about how do we shrink a 40,000 square foot building down to 18,000 square feet and still have the space to provide the services. The answer is, although Caryl is an active building, it's a clearly oversized building for Dover's needs. And we got to 18,000 by a little curve. When we did the original work, Ford mentioned that Stowe has 11,000 square feet of dedicated space, plus a piece of another 11,000 which they share with the fire department for storage. The Wellesley Toll Center is just under 13,000 square feet, and they were talking about starting to bump up a little bit. They were feeling a little tight. So we chose 13,000 square feet as sort of the base case. And then as Ford went around and asked various town departments what their future space needs would be, he was told that this town would like to reserve an additional 5,000 square feet for potential future office space, because at some point we're going to have to take a harder look at this townhouse, which is also older, and we may have to do some work. So at the very minimum, we'll probably need swing space. So that's how we got to the 18,000. Well, to begin with, all of it.
You're saying it'll be town?
The town asked us to
reserve 5,000 square feet, but if they're not using it, it's public space. It's only there as a contingency in case they need it. Sorry.
The other thing is, an interesting Natick, which is, what, a town of 35,000 people, their building is 23,000 square feet, their community center, of which 7,000 is a gym. So that reduces it to about a 15,000, 16,000 square foot building. So it's interesting, all of the towns, be they Wellesley, Natick, Stowe, Weston, they all are about the same size, offering very, very similar programs. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Come up, just come up, that'd be great, and go ahead. Thank you.
My name is Janet Bowser. I'm at 17 Sterling Drive, and I've been a resident for about 24 years now. I'm an environmental attorney by training, and I just had some questions or suggestions as you move forward and do your analysis. Just a confirmation that you are looking at, and this builds on what you said, in terms of the renovation phase, all of the potential environmental issues impacting that building. I think, at least what you have on your website, there's some assumptions about moving forward, what the actual renovation costs are, and then annual maintenance costs. But asbestos, lead, mold. My children were some of the last in Caryl before it closed. And when it rained in that building, there weren't buckets, there were trash barrels to capture the rain throughout the entire building. I would be very concerned about environmental safety issues in a renovation, and I think those need to be really well explored. On your website, it said there was a 2018 independent assessment of Carroll's capital needs by On-Site Insight. Did that include a full environmental diagnostic of the building?
I think it's mechanical.
It's just, it didn't go into that much depth. What you're asking for would be definitely during the schematic phase, if we're looking at renovation. I've been approached by somebody who does nothing but green buildings, for example, in terms of heating and air conditioning and whatnot. That's all at the next stage that we would look at. We really have to look at those things. I have met with the building inspector. I met with him about 10 days ago. I must admit, there are some issues that he brought up that I think we're going to have to very seriously take a look at, and that's some hazardous material that may be in the building. We have to look at, obviously, the septic system, make sure it meets Title V. We're going to have to look at all kinds of other things. So even though that's all been done before, we're going to have to do it again. So what you're saying, yes, that will all be dealt with if we're going to go the renovation route.
Okay.
If we don't go the renovation route and we tear it down, we have to do some of the same things already.
Right. But I think for folks who may be on the fence, whether it's new or renovate, a full assessment of the costs going forward, and you really couldn't do that without knowing if you have asbestos, lead, mold. So I would encourage you at least to do a preliminary environmental assessment so that the costs are known.
Thank you.
Also, the town is a green community. We were designated that a couple years ago. That's a commitment the town has made to be as green, going energy efficient as possible. I would also hope in the analysis to town meeting in the fall, there is looking at the energy efficient aspects of a new build. Yes. And the life cycle costs of that. Because it used to be a new building or your highest lead energy building was a lot more. Not anymore. The costs of a lot of recycled materials, energy efficient materials, have come down dramatically. So I think that, and there's also a lot of state and federal grant money to do green buildings. I certainly support a new building. I think just a cursory look at the numbers are that it's almost a no-brainer. You don't, just as the town made a commitment 20 years ago to a new Chickering school, a new middle school, those were smart investments in the town. And I think we need to make a smart investment here as well. I certainly support a new building. The other thing I would say, I know a cost is an issue. If we go with an expensive building, a debt exclusion, there is a provision in state tax law that you can exempt low income or fixed income folks from a debt exclusion vote. So that might be something to look at as well.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate it.
We should get Janet. Janet, right? Is it Janet?
Yes.
Have you signed in? If you would, that would be very helpful because we're going to be in touch with you.
Yeah, we're going to put the hook on.
Any other? Come on up. It's the danger of speaking. We all of a sudden have your name and information.
Eric Morris, 25 Main Street. I know I speak for everyone here. I really wanted to express, Mary, and my gratitude to both of you for the amount of time that you served the town. I think many people are just simply unaware of the many, many hours that our public servants devote and our elected officials devote to the town. So I wanted to make sure we thanked you for that. How would the building be financed, whether it's a renovation or a new build?
Right now, despite what we just heard about possible other funding, it would be done through your tax dollars. Roughly a $13 million expense on an average homeowner would have a yearly cost of about, $370, $360, $70 a year.
Again, these were assumptions that we made going in to give you a sort of a ballpark estimate. We don't necessarily think we brought you to second base, but we certainly have you in the baseball park.
Oh, it's the banker coming out and...
I know, and so when we talked about funding, we had the funding question.
Yeah.
And just to be able to take this thing forward without going into a lot of different options, we just said, okay, let's just assume that we borrow the money. And the $370 a year for a resident is a pretty low mortgage payment.
Of course it is. One last question, if I may. There's been some discussion this evening about seniors living in town and their needs. I wonder if you're aware of any other town committee that is looking into the possibility of some housing for our senior residents.
The Board of Selectmen met May 31st, I think that was a Friday. We spent about 3 hours, 4 hours, putting together a list of goals and priorities for the upcoming next 2 or 3 years, and housing is one of the goals. Relative to, I was speaking with the residents, and they were talking about tax relief. And I asked our town administrator to pull together information about what programs are available for tax relief. He gave me a packet. I haven't read it yet. But apparently there are programs that we need to take more advantage of or make people aware of at the very beginning to sort of get that issue at least teed up. Bankers, you would understand that term, right? Teed up.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Jacques Boudreau, 36 Dover Road. Been a resident of Dover for pretty much my whole life, so coming up...
It has been your whole life, hasn't it?
Well, no, I moved in when I was 5 years old, so. I went to school at Caryl. Doesn't mean I have any really drawn attraction towards it. I've grown up here. I did historic preservation for a long time in town. Now I'm a dentist in South Natick, so I've left the field. I will say that people look towards the new all the time and say, oh, it's great, it's wonderful throughout the old. I live in a house that has a history of roots going back to 1750. I grew up in a house that was built in 1918. I don't always buy that newer is better. So I understand the needs that need to be addressed. But I do think that there is part of this town that is charming in a way. I have yet to see a building that's, 15, 20 years old that, let's put it this way, I don't see much construction nowadays going on that's going to last 100 years. and they come with more difficulty as far as renovations or future problems. The problems are like, oh my gosh, we have a building we're going to go 50 years, we're not going to do anything with. That's not true. Look at the Chickering School. We're already going back and looking at air conditioning systems, and that would cost millions of dollars to add to it, to make it more usable by the kids, and we say, okay, we need to do that. I still think that to throw out the option of renovating, I think we're not talking about painting at this point, and we're not talking about just a small thing. We're talking about gutting out and looking at it again. I think it does have character, it does have history. Do I want to see this town hall go down? No, of course not. I think sometimes we can look at it a second time. I encourage us all to kind of sit back instead of saying, well, we all like new in many ways, but I'll take my 2004 Taurus over the new cars that are being driven nowadays because I know it's going to last longer and I can work with it. I know it sounds silly in a way, but I think sometimes you sit back and go, not always the new thing and the solution is going to be the best. Again, if it ends up being that it needs to go, it needs to go. I'm not going to cry a tear. But I think going into it, at times saying the problems that we've had with it, leaking roofs, I get it. But it's hard to do renovations on a building that you're using all the time. So you can't address the mold, the lead, the asbestos, the roofs. I mean, when you're trying to get the use out of it on a yearly basis, you can't do that. We're looking at a full gut out, looking at a full rebuild. I will argue as far as the energy efficiency, again, my house was built, has its roots going back to 1750. I'll put my house against any of these houses that are going up in town right now as far as being certified. It's more energy efficient in every way, shape, and form between the windows, the insulation, the water's usage. So that really, in my head, is like, you can make it work. I've seen other towns make it work on scales. So I think in some ways, we have an opportunity here to sit back and maybe look a little bit different. I don't know how it's going to be presented as far as what the renovations will go or what shape it will be, but in some ways I encourage us all to kind of give it a second look before we just throw the whole building away. That's it.
So now we've covered the issues. So as we've gone through this exercise, I was surprised at the relative closeness of the costs for each option. And in many ways, I can make a case for renovate if I wanted to, or I could make a case for new, and some of the discussion here has done just that. So for renovate, you get a 40,000 square foot building, so your cost per square foot is small, is less. You have plenty of space for future growth. And there are the people who would prefer to have that as remaining in the center of town. So it provides for space in a different way than a new building. And when you look at, people, at the last meeting we had, people were talking about energy efficiency, about the HVAC system, and they're saying, well, if you put in a new building, it's going to be super energy efficient. But of course, you have to compare that to a renovated old building, whose also efficiency would be elevated. I tried to tell a story the last time about my own personal experience renovating a house. I bought a mid-1930s Tudor house in Glen Rock, New Jersey. Beautiful house. And I knew going in that it was going to require a lot of TLC. And we did it. And we turned that house into a pretty terrific house. It's the only house I lost money on when I sold it. And the problem, besides that, which was a real problem, was that when you do renovate an older building, you do find things that you didn't anticipate. So at the last forum, I said that when we're talking about the renovation costs, we're going to have to put an asterisk on there, because when you open the walls, you just don't know what you're going to find. So when I moved up to Dover, I bought new. But this will come down to personal preference. We want to have it really will. The numbers are pretty, you could spin this either way. It's going to come down to personal preference. So we just want to make sure that everybody who cares hears what we have to say, and will come to the meeting on the 7th of October, say it again, and vote.
The only thing I would like to add to that is we have to do something. We can do so much better than we've been doing. When you go into the building and you look at this COA space, that space could be so much better if we invested in it to meet their core programs. If you looked at the rooms that we have for activity rooms, look at the library that's on the second floor, if you've been in that. It could be so much better. But the town needs to stop saying no, and we need to start saying yes for that building, be it renovation or be new, but we need to move forward. And I think that's what we're saying. You know, both of them are solutions, but we've got to move forward. Any other comments, questions? Really?
All right, come on, I'm going to.
You're going to stir up the.
I'm going to
stir them up.
Well, I'm just going to say I mentioned the pros around the renovate, the pros around build new. It's purpose built, built to current code. The sort of the tricky part about it is because it's a much smaller footprint. You go from 41,000 square feet down to 18,000 square feet. You free up space for two things. You free up space for the future in the center of town that you could make into a park in the interim, and you have space for parking. The thing that we heard most of, what would you do differently, when we asked each of the directors of those facilities, every single one of them said, plan for more parking. Everybody's experience that we talked to was, yep, we started out here, and then over a few years, the participation just expanded, every one of them. So my personal bias is, when I'm looking at things like this, is to find real life cases where they had success and then copy the success. So the information that we're bringing to you isn't sort of theoretical. It's actual experiences of towns like us who've been successful at putting together a community center. Some of them are renovated, some of them are new. That choice is us. That choice is up to us. That's our opportunity to make a statement. Again, future optimistic, aspirational. Somebody must have a question. They kept us up here till 9:15 last time. You can beat that record. Let me ask, then I'll come back. What other kinds of information would you guys need from us to help you make a decision? Is there anything, I don't know if you've gone through the slide deck or if you've looked at the material. Yeah, you have to come up because, again, so the people at home.
Very specifically, are you talking about daycare? Are you talking about, I don't know what the specifics of this are. I know Council on Aging.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about, exercise.
Yeah.
But are you talking about daycare? Are you talking about offering transportation, which is essential to make this thing work? You have somebody who lives on the other side of town and is no longer driving.
In all of the feedback that we've gotten, transportation hasn't come up. You're the first one to ask about transportation.
I'll tell you from my personal experience, if we did not offer transportation where I worked, we would have shut down.
Yeah.
Are you offering lunches?
Well, they have lunches on a pretty regular basis now.
But
the actual programs that we ultimately place in the center, when they're renovated or new, that's going to come from the next phase. We're just providing a template of what other communities have done and have. Some have.
You're talking about looking at what has worked elsewhere.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes. Do you have any of the?
I don't know how to get back on there.
Technology, yeah. So, again, when we did the check boxes on services, when we did the check boxes on activities, when we looked at the 15 like and 8? 15 neighboring and 8 like, so over 20 communities. We know what the suite of programs that these communities provide, and we're gonna look to duplicate that.
The only things that we haven't heard is a gym. We haven't heard many people talk about a gym. Pool, we've heard a few more talk about a pool. I will tell you that when you start thinking about that space, if it's a renovation, would probably not accommodate it, number one. Number two, If we're talking about $13 million now, and if you wanted to do a gym similar to the one up at the middle school, that's another $6 million on top of what we're talking. And if you wanted to look at a pool, that's even more expensive. So, you know, the smaller footprint would allow future generations in Dover to add those kinds of facilities if they wanted to do that. The larger footprint would not allow that to be done. Come on up. Thank you.
I'm Annie Bauman. I'm on 12 Windsor Road. My question is about, has anybody brought up the idea of renting, of having the building also have like a revenue stream where we can like rent out a larger space for everybody's bar mitzvah? And because I know in Weston, their community center, it's very expensive actually to do private parties and functions, and that would offset future costs. And has anybody talked about that? But it would have to be something that was like worthy, the space would have to be worthy of, you know, hosting those types of things.
People haven't talked about it, but you're absolutely right. Weston does that a great deal. That room that we saw up there, which was a stunning room, yes, they do that. And that's certainly we could do if we wanted to. Let me just talk about renting for a minute. We have licensees over there now. Our dance classes are run by a licensee. We have a spinning and rowing, which is incidentally a fabulous group of people and good fun, but that is done that way. We have a martial arts class that's done that way. We have the community daycare, a preschool program over there, and they lease space.
Okay.
That's all an anomaly. You don't see that at any other facility. The 15 that we talked to, what they do, and I'll use Wellesley's Recreation Center, not the COO, Wellesley's Recreation Center has all the programs that we've talked about, and they hire somebody to come in and run it, and Wellesley Rec takes 20% of the income, and the person that comes in keeps the other. So that's how they fund it.
Yeah.
But in terms of answering your question directly, for bar mitzvahs, for weddings, for parties or whatever, that can be done. You know, you have the space, and you probably will have to rent it if for nothing more than custodial services. And in most of the buildings, you cannot occupy the building unless there's a custodian there. And that custodian not only is going to help clean up, but that custodian's going to set up, because we're talking about, and I don't think we said this, Bob, shared activity spaces. So a room like this might be used during the period of a day 3 or 4 different times for various purposes. Somebody's got to set it up, somebody's got to break it down, somebody's got to get it ready for the future. And that costs money, and that may be a rental situation. Those are operating questions, and the selectmen are going to have to handle that as we move forward. But I think it's a great question. It's something we need to think about and address. Thank you.
Hang on, sir. Isn't it a relatively common practice for community centers to rent space to community?
Yes, is it a common practice for people to do what you suggested? The answer is yes. Anyone else?
You can't ask yourself questions.
I'm not going to ask a question. I'm going to say thank you for coming. It's warm. What we need from you is bring your questions, bring your comments to us, send us emails, however you want to do it. But at a town meeting, we need 175 people to have a quorum. We're not telling you how we want you to vote, because we're not going to do that. But we need 175 to 200 people. So if each of you take on the responsibility of getting 10 people to the town meeting, that really is important. We're going into very quiet months. I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot on social media. I'm hoping that you're going to see a lot on emails. If we have your email addresses, we're going to do all that as much as we can. But come September is going to be our big blitz. It's a short period of time. We're all very busy, but we're asking for one thing. Come to town meeting. That's going to be the key. If we don't get a quorum, nothing is going to happen. So we'd love to have 200 200 plus. That Jim Rapetti would not believe it if we had that, but we've got to do that. So please, 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 get your friends, you all come. It'll be a great, fun night. You think?
I do think. I'm excited about it as we, right now, and it's only June. I would emphasize, if there's information you want us to provide that isn't in the pack, or we haven't talked about it, let us know. One question that came up at last week's meeting was a woman asked, what would a smaller footprint building look like on that site? She said, I'm a visual learner. I have a hard time picturing a smaller space. So that was something none of us thought about. We thought about taking pictures of other spaces so you could get an idea of what's possible. We're going to work on that. We have a volunteer project architect, and we're going to ask her to help us provide that information back to the community.
What Bob doesn't know, because he was away having a party, but just today I've contacted the Tolles Parsons building, asked permission to do a drone shot up above. We have somebody, I'll give you his name, it's Andrew Mudge Auditorium. He's a filmmaker. He has an FAA license to fly a drone. He's going to take a picture of that, hopefully, if we get permission. We'll do the same thing over here, because he knows how to do that. We'll show an aerial view of this building on the property, and we'll superimpose the building that's 12,400 square feet, so people will get an idea for that answer. I think visually that would help people do that. So, Bob, that's in the works, and I hopefully will have it done in about 10 days. So.
That'd be cool. Thank you very much for coming out. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you guys have. Enjoy.
Thank you.